Jury duty, the conclusion. So, yesterday was the last day of jury duty, and I believe at this point I've documented all 5 days in terms of kind of the procedures, the types of witnesses, um, how things functioned. So, what I thought in this video, this is really the sixth video or the conclusion, is I would actually talk about the case and less about the the process in the courtroom, as I've already just said I talked about in the previous parts to this series. So this case, now that I can talk about it, is involving a male who lives in the state of New Jersey. His wife is the sister of a woman who lives in, or did at the time of the crime, in Hyannis, Massachusetts. And this woman who lives in Hyannis, Massachusetts, has 2 children. Three now, but at the time of this, 2. And one of these children at the time, so this took place in 2021. At the time, one of the children, she was 14. So during 2021, we were on the kind of tail end of COVID. The daughter, her name was Gabby. Gabby was having an issue with her mother and stating that her mother's too strict, and she, just very, very difficult relationship. So during homeschooling, the mother's sister, who lives in New Jersey, her name's Charlene, and the male, her husband, Sheldon, thought, let's go to their grandmothers in Georgia. Warm weather, get away from COVID, homeschool. So that's what they did. So Gabby joined her aunt, Charlene and Uncle Sheldon and their family, and went to Georgia. And the mom in Hyannis signed off on it. She's like, you know what, I'm kind of at wit's end with my daughter. And they said, yeah, we'll take her, we'll just kind of maybe a change of scene, we'll help. So what happened was, after a few months in Georgia, they came back to New Jersey, and Gabby was staying with her aunt and uncle and their family in New Jersey. Well, Sheldon, the uncle, sexually abused Gabby while she was there. He got drunk, and I'm not being graphic in this video, but we got to hear step by step exactly what happened, using all the words by Gabby, and then later her mother testified and took us through everything. And the mother was obviously very, very emotional, because she was using words, he put his penis inside my daughter. Like, we had to listen to that. Much easier for me to listen to it than probably having to be up on the stand knowing that your daughter went through this. So anyway, that happened in New Jersey. And so you're saying, well, why is this guy on trial in New Jersey? So they told us that story, and they said, he's not on trial for those crimes in this case, but to give you a background. And I was kind of surprised by that, because a lot of times when you see these things, the defense says, hey, we don't want to influence the jury because it has nothing to do with this. Later I learned, well, it absolutely does, because he's also going to be on trial for those crimes as well. So where he gets into trouble in Hyannis, Massachusetts is, so eventually Gabby comes back home to live with her mother in their apartment in Hyannis. And none of these people live in that same apartment anymore. The girl's 18 now because this was 4 years ago. But the Gabby would babysit her daughter while her mom was off working all day, and Gabby was homeschooling or whatever. I don't know exactly what was going on with the education at that point. So Sheldon, who normally worked at Home Depot in New Jersey, got up one morning and drove straight to Hyannis and got to the parking lot of the apartment and said, come outside, come outside. You know, he was basically, there's a lot of phone records involved, and that's what I was talking about in the other parts, like where his phone was hitting off towers was evidence, all the messages, all the phone calls, like just in the period of time leading up to that. She had text, he had convinced her to text him, picture her like naked. We saw that in the evidence. I mean, it was hard. It was a hard case for sure. So he was being charged with 3 crimes, basically in the back seat of his vehicle in the parking lot. One was, it was like aggravated, and I probably have things mixed up a little bit, but it was aggravated assault of like a minor or someone who's 14 years old, of like it's called like illegal kissing or something like that. She had a huge hickey on her neck, and we had photographs of that as evidence. That was one charge. Second charge was aggravated assault and illegal touching of private areas over the clothing. In this case, it was putting his hand on her crotch, but over her underwear. And in the charge, like on the piece of paper, actually uses the proper word for it. And then the third charge was rape and rape of a 14-year-old. So this all happened in the and I'm not using the word alleged anymore because we found him guilty on all 3 charges. So it happened. He was prosecuted. He's being prosecuted, or was prosecuted on this, and is awaiting sentencing. And so during the trial, I could not look any of this up, and I did not look up anything. I stayed away from local news. I stayed away from people. And I talked about in the last episode how packed that courtroom was and everything, and I'm sure it was all news and all that. So what I found out after the fact is, after when we were deliberating, the judge told us, is he being prosecuted for those other crimes in New Jersey? And the judge said, you saw the New Jersey police in the courtroom today, didn't you? I would bet on it. So I know what the charges that we found him guilty on, at least one of the charges, even the rape charge, it's like 20 years to life in prison, and then plus the time on the other charges and whatever he gets hit with in New Jersey. Even if he gets minimum on all the charges, he's in jail a long time. And I don't know how parole works, time off. Oh, excuse me, for good behavior. I'm always yawning on these videos and I'm talking to you, sorry. It's lunchtime, I'm starving. I do these when I'm working during lunch. And there's a lot there. This guy is not going to see the light of day at all. And that's the crime. That's the case. You can do a Google search on Sheldon Clare. Sheldon spelled C-H, Clare, I think it's Clare. And when I finally Google searched it yesterday after I got home, the crimes in New Jersey were listed. It doesn't say anything about being the family member, about Gabriella Chin being a family member, but I know obviously being the case that she is. And so Gabriella Chin, she's probably not listed in those articles because she was a minor at the time. So it probably just says a woman, an underage woman. I don't think it has the name, but it's Gabriella Chin. She's 18 now, and she doesn't live in Hyannis any longer. She still lives in Massachusetts. Um, so this is very, very unfortunate. Very, very unfortunate. And the case had a lot of circumstantial evidence, and I might have talked about this before. So it didn't actually have semen in her underwear. It had DNA, but it wasn't semen. So the defense was trying to argue, well, like, he does laundry, trying to get his wife to testify. Oh, well, they do laundry together, and he might have touched it, and and then the cell phone. There's literally a cell phone tower a block away, and he was hitting off of that. They're like, well, excuse me, it's not exact. He could be within 2 miles of the tower. Doesn't mean he's at that address. And then also, so Gabby's mom, so it would be Sheldon's sister-in-law or his wife's sister, had no idea he was coming to New Jersey for the day. Charlene, Sheldon's wife, said he went to New York for the day for Uber. Well, don't you need your cell phone? And why aren't any towers pinging off of that? And the defense was like, well, cell phone doesn't have to be, like, you don't have to be, all the data said was his cell phone was in Hyannis, but it didn't say he physically was. So there's a lot of like stuff that the defense was trying to cast a little bit of doubt at, but just the circumstantial evidence was so overwhelming at some point. It really showed that the prosecution built a nice story and took us through it to get us there. And if there was one thing, if that instead of DNA in her underwear, his DNA in the underwear, if it was semen, I think within the second we sat down in that jury room, we would all voted guilty. But again, the defense did enough that we paused and had to work our way through it, because we're like, this guy's going to be in prison for a long time. Let's just go through all the evidence and talk through it again. So that's what happened. Sentencing is next week. In the jury room, after it was all over, when the judge kind of broke character and was just chatting with us, someone asked, he said, hey, well, what questions do you have? He was very nice, he's very open as where he could be, and he said, someone asked him, when's sentencing? Sentencing is next week, and he said it's an open court, so if you can check with the scheduler. He's like, I haven't scheduled it yet. He's like, but it'll be next week. Check with the scheduler, and if you want to come in for the sentencing, you can. I may look up to see when it is, and if I can work around my work schedule, I might go, just because I was part of this trial, and kind of to see the outcome of it. I'm sure I could read it in the paper or online at some point. And then the other question was he in custody after we delivered a guilty on all three charge verdict? So the judge said yes. So he was led to lockup or holding or whatever. He was out previously on bail, because I know my fellow jury members said they saw him, because there's a marketplace across the street from the court where, like, we would just at lunch recess we would just go over to get a sandwich or whatever. So a few of my jury mates saw him in there with his wife. The thing that blows my mind, and maybe you guys think this too, if any of this is making sense, is his wife, it was his sister's daughter that he raped, but yet his wife stood on the stand, was the only witness that the defense called, and testified that he was in New York that day. And like, to us jurors, it was an egregious lying on the stand. Like, and in closing arguments, the prosecution called that out. Like, he's lying to you. How could he be in New York and his cell phone be at the other place? Hyannis. So it was very interesting, because the other part of this we talked about in the jury room is Charlene and Sheldon are married, right? But Charlene lives in Georgia and he lives in New Jersey. They haven't lived together in a while. So we were like, this is so odd that this would happen. So during cross examination, the prosecution said, basically said, does Sheldon pay your bills? Was trying to establish she's only up there testifying on his behalf because it's going to damage her financially if he gets locked up. And the judge, the defense kept, objecting, and the um, the judge kept, overruled. I was gonna mix up sustained and overruled, but basically it was saying, prosecution, you can't ask that question. What she should have done is rephrased it totally, and said, because she tried a few other ways, like, is he paying your bills, kind of thing. She should have just said, how do you currently pay your bills? Because it wouldn't do, I think that would have been a way around it. But it was obvious to us jurors that this was a financial arrangement, that they were still married, and he was probably paying some bills, and it probably was kind of, I'm speculating, but of course, an agreement that, you go along with this. This is what I was doing. You buy my story, and we don't have to live together or talk to each other, and I'll continue to pay your bills. I don't know. I mean, it's just again, all these pieces along the way. You just can't. I mean, he's innocent until proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt, and that's what it was. We were beyond reasonable doubt. And I think if like maybe two or so of these pieces, circumstantial evidence, didn't exist, then we might be hanging around the reasonable doubt area, But again, it was a good job, and I understand why prosecution took this case, and I understand why. I looked up the defense attorney. What was very impressive about Attorney Garnett is, it looks like she was a career businesswoman, graduating college like 1980, I think I saw, and I think she held executive roles like vice president, president roles throughout her career. Then at some point, I think in the early 2000s, she put herself through law school and became an attorney. I was going to use the F word, but I was going to say effing awesome. Like, that is really cool. And she's really good at her job, even though she lost the case. I really liked her. Really, really liked her. She was just methodical, and she spoke to whoever was on the stand in a way that, like, she was trying to get him to open up. So she wasn't being a jerk. Sometimes on TV you see that, but that is how it went. And so that's really what the charges were. So 3 criminal charges, rape, illegal touching over the clothes, and then kissing, and to a 14-year-old who is also a family member by marriage. Just disgusting. And you guys know me, those of you who follow the channel know that I have, Eddie is a 13-year-old and my daughter's 12-year-old. So surprisingly, we talked about it briefly, I didn't get kicked off, or not to say kicked off, but surprisingly, I got picked despite them seeing that and asking me, do you think children have the ability to lie? I said, of course. Do you think police officers are always telling the truth? No, not necessarily. And by the way, I think police officers 99.9% of the time are telling the truth. And they also may think they're telling the truth, but may have misinformation. Yes, there are such thing as bad cops out there, but I like to go around thinking every cop's a good cop until they're not, because it's kind of like if you go around the other way thinking every cop's a bad cop until they show that you're not, you're going to make it tough on yourself. All right, well, thanks for watching. This concludes it. And the message to you is, if you get selected for jury duty, be honest during the selection period and think about the duty as a citizen and the duty to your fellow citizens that you are doing by taking the time, answering questions openly and honestly, and if you to basically allow yourself to get picked versus coming up with some cockamamie thing, or just be like, making it seem like you're racist or whatever. Do it, and it will be an experience that changes your life, and gives you new appreciation for the judicial system. And my thing was, it works perfectly when there's no outside influences. And what I mean by that is there's no politics, trying to whatever. We see all this garbage in the news about, it left or right, really it's right leaning judge, and the politics, and the judge is trying to impress because their boss is the president, they're quote unquote. None of that. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what walk of life you are, what political background at all. At all. And that's what was so precious about this. And it worked beautifully because there was no outside influences trying to influence jury, judge, whatever. It unfolded naturally, and we got the outcome that was supposed to happen. All right. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. Comment, like, subscribe, share your experiences, and if there's anything specific you want to know about the case, comment, because I can talk about it. If you're friends with me on Facebook, I did a post on it, and there's a lot of comments on it asking questions about the case, so look me up on Facebook, and I'm always happy to add you guys as friends, and we'll see you in the next one.